They have them. Here we go. Dr. Assisi, if you want to go ahead and start it.
Love me tender, love me do. All right, so here's the question. When you say in your answer that to take one's life for the greater good, what you said in your answer made me confused. Here in your answer, is in it clear that the codification says that taking somebody's or anybody's life is never right? So death penalty, euthanasia, and abortion is not within the divine laws. Okay. So, yes. What I was trying to say, and maybe that wasn't clear because I only had 4 minutes to talk about a very complicated topic, is I am not one who will judge your acts. I am not one who will be able to tell you what you should or should not do. Because what I have learned through this wonderful body of knowledge, Spiritism, is what the spirits say in the Spirit's book, that the gravest infringement that we can do for anybody is to violate their freedom of thought. That we don't have the right to tell people how to think. What we can do, however, is offer an opinion, because we would not like to have our very own right to think a specific way violated, which goes back to that simple piece. But clearly I didn't make myself as clear as I would have liked to, even though in my head I thought I did, because words are imperfect. But what I was trying to say is I am not to judge people's acts, but I would like to think that I would not pick somebody's life. I would not take somebody's life for the benefit of others, because I think you might recall this. I don't get to decide and play God. It's not up for me to decide who lives or dies. But to be honest with you, these are very difficult questions, and that's what I was trying to come across as well, because they seem very absolute, but when my brain starts to kick in and unfold them, I start to break them down to experiences and think about them and say, what would happen if somebody, for instance, walked into my house and pointed a gun to my wife and my kid, and I had a gun too? What would I do? That's one of the examples that came to my mind. And I like to think that I would not use that gun. I really like to think that. But until it happens, and because I don't know myself that well, I can't tell you what I would do. And this is me being completely honest with you, because I recognize that I am still a very imperfect being, trying to learn much as you are. And so I would like to think from the bottom of my heart that I would not make use of that weapon. And I think I wouldn't, but I can't say for sure. So because of that, I can't say whether you should or should not do. I can point to what we have learned, especially in Spiritism, which has been extremely uplifting for me, to say that once we understand that there is a higher power in control, and I even joked, remember, about let go and let God. Once you understand that somebody at play, because I don't have all this information, I surrender my judgment to that power. And let that power make a decision for me, because I don't know best. Now, you should definitely ask more people, because I'm by no means an authority on moral living. But that's my perspective, and that's what I've learned with Spiritism, is that it is okay for us not to have all the answers, but that we can go out and search for them, because there's many different ways to do that. And I absolutely love these questions. Those of you who know me, probably to a fault, would say that I love this kind of stuff, talking about this. In fact, I was thinking about afterwards, and a couple of friends are trying to do this podcast every once in a while, which we call Conversations. because the goal was to have conversation about specific topics. And I think this is going to be one of them. I think we should break this there, get different people together, and have them come out from different perspectives and see what it lives. I think on the whole, we all agreed that we shouldn't do it. But I also want to be earnest with you, because I think you deserve my honesty, to say that I don't know, because I am such an imperfect spirit, what I would do just yet. I like to believe that I would be able to surrender that choice to God, who is infinitely better and kinder than I am. And I think I would. I really think I would. But I can't say 100% because I'm not that kind of person just yet. Does that make sense? The question was referring to one of our previous questions and answers about whether it was justified to take somebody's life to prevent damage to many people's lives. Right? And so that's a tough one. I think that I came down on the side of, no, I don't think I would do it. I don't think that's the correct thing, because we need to respect people's free will. But honestly, I should tell you that because I'm not an authority on this, although I would very much like to, I might act sometimes differently. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Next question is for Dr. Daniel Assisi. Daniel, is the passage the same for all?
That's a great question. Because it is and it isn't. How's that for an answer? The act of passing is common to us all. But clearly, as you can tell, there are different ways of passing. We see that every day. And therefore, even though we know that we must go through these certain truths that we are going to pass, how we go to the process, how we enter the process and come out of the process is slightly different. One of the great things, and if I were to piggyback on what Haroldo was saying, is one of the great things about God as an educator is that he has an individualized learning plan for all of us, tailored to our needs and our expectations. What is that to say? That although we know that we must go through this process of eventually leaving our body and disconnecting from it and acquainting yourselves again with not having a physical body for a little bit, how we disconnect from that body can vary greatly. It depends on our awareness of whether we have passed or not. Sometimes we hold on to our physical body because we don't want to accept that we have passed, or that we want to go back and we don't simply understand what's happening. So the act of passing is always the same in terms of process. We know that we have a physical body and we must shed this mortal coil at one point in time, as Shakespeare says, right? And we also know that after we do that, eventually, we are going to come to terms with what has happened and who we are, because we're no longer with the physical body. However, how we do that is very different. Sudden deaths are very different than those long-winded deaths that we expect with old age, right? Sometimes when something comes all of a surprise, it's more shocking, perhaps more difficult, which actually leads us to think that sometimes when we have a family member who has a long, prolonged illness and who goes on for months, weeks, even years sometimes, it's almost a blessing. Listen carefully. I don't want to say that that's a bad thing. I don't want to downplay your feelings, but I'm saying it gives all of those involved time to prepare. It gives you time to talk, to say what's important, to evaluate the relationship, to make amends, to do what you will, which many other people don't have in sudden death. So that which may sound horrible for us in one side, oh my God, I know this is going to happen, I know this person is going to die or pass. The fact that we have a long time to prepare for it, it's a blessing. Isn't it funny how situations can change how we look at things sometimes? And so the act of passing is the same. The mechanics of it, it's pretty similar, right? We know that there's a physical body, there's a perispirit, that's a spirit, and the time of reacquaintance on the other side also depends of our knowledge of this, of our belief in this. The mind is such a powerful thing that it concocts things of its own, right? And so if we don't accept death, or we're not open to the idea of death, it might be harder to come to terms with the fact that you have passed and you're still there. And we see that often sometimes in our Spiritist groups whenever we have mediumship meetings that are geared towards aiding those who are in that condition, for instance. So make a long story short and stop battling. The act of passing is the same. How we do it depends greatly on the circumstances and our own internal fodder, how we prepare for that. The more prepared we are, chances are the smoother and the better it will be, because we'll be open to that, and we'll know that we're not alone. That fear will be less pronounced, which will open us up for receiving the help of those who are certainly there to help us, because we all have them. So it is the same, but it isn't.
Thank you. Nós temos 8 minutos até o break e perguntas suficientes para 6 dias de conversa. Então, no way. Are you marking? It's for you. So you know exactly how much time we have, right? Perfect. Do we have the right to end a life to prevent further damage?
4 minutes on that one.
3.
Do we have the right to end the life to prevent further damage? Do we have a right to? Okay. One of the things that comes to mind is a beautiful sentence by the Apostle Paul, in which he tells us that everything is allowable to us, but not everything is good for us. So talking about rights and responsibilities is a really tricky thing, because it is to presume to know the mind of the Creator. And that is really, really hard, for me at least. So do we have the right to take somebody's life to prevent further damage or group damage? There are many different schools of thought on this one. There are some that say that the benefits of the many outweigh the benefits of the few. And there are those who sit on the other side and say every life is sacred, which it is. And both are right. So life is not always black and white. It really depends on the situation. But here's what we know. We know that God allows us to make these choices. And it's hard for us to give a blanket explanation, abstractly speaking, without knowing the specifics of the situation, because there might be gradations, right? And so we need to look at the different things. And we need to be able to live with the consequences of our acts. And that's an important thing to take away. So I'll give you a non-answer. Each one of us has to work this out. We get asked a lot about death as well when it comes to that, right? Is it okay to end death earlier because of suffering? It's hard for us to have meaningful conversations in such a short period of time without knowing the specifics. But the most important thing I would say is that oftentimes we have to stop thinking with our physical eyes and start thinking with our spiritual eyes, and arrive at a decision that we're comfortable with. Because oftentimes we just look at the physical piece, but we don't necessarily see the tail end of the thing. Sometimes we see a photo, but we don't see the whole movie, right? And I know that we're running out of time, and I apologize, but let me give you an example. Let's say that you're sitting in front of the TV and you turn it on and you see this guy going this way, chasing another guy with a gun. right, and shooting him. And you go, that's a bad guy, right, running after the other one. But what you missed was an hour before, the movie was showing how the first guy was actually going back and chasing all these people with a bigger gun, right? So what we see is generally a picture in time, and we need to be mindful of the bigger perspective. And when we say that, we don't know exactly what role that person is playing in the life of others, or what others are playing in that person's life. So it's really hard for us to give you a blanket answer. I know that sometimes we want a blanket answer for comfort. We want yes or no, because it brings us certainty. And one of the things that we fear the most is uncertainty. It's really hard to live in uncertainty. That's why we make up all kinds of rules and things. But this one, I would struggle with answering it without knowing the specifics of the situation. I don't think I could really give you a good answer. Yes, it's okay to go and think. I want to err on the side of caution in saying that maybe I would choose to preserve life and let God figure things out. A friend of mine sometimes tells me, like, sometimes you just have to kind of let go and let God. And maybe I would let go and let God at that time, but I'm not quite sure. I'm being honest with you, truthful. Love to talk more about this later. But maybe this is the path that I would choose. But I would also be kind enough to respect your free will in your decision-making process, and remind you that whichever decision you do, you might want to think about the consequences of your acts. Maybe that helps you clarify a specific situation. And okay. And thanks for your patience. I'm going to toss it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Assisi.
Here's a good one. How do we prepare a materialist terminal patient for the passage? Good question. How would we prepare ourselves for the passage? How would we prepare or help others that we love for the passage? I think probably there wouldn't be much difference in my approach there. I think we ought to first and foremost be there for them, and not necessarily specifically in cases where people might have trouble understanding spirituality, force spirituality on them. Again, respecting their wishes. We also see something really fascinating that Kardec brings us. I think it's genius sometimes. It's so obvious, but it's so well written by Kardec a couple of times. In the introduction, I think, of the Medium's book, he says, before we make anybody a spiritist, we need to make them a spiritualist. Before we go into complicated things like perispirit and reincarnation sometimes, we ought to figure it out if that person believes in a higher power, if God is within their realm of possibilities, because otherwise we're just skipping a couple of steps and it's not going to make any sense. Kardec, being an educator, says also in the Medium's book that it's important for us to work from the known to the unknown. That is, we also need to consider what is that person's set of beliefs and ideas, and then work with that to bring them into something new. For that same very reason, right? If I am trying to teach you to speak Italian, because I know Italian, for example, I don't talk to you about it in French if you don't know French, right? Speaking to you in French to get you to speak Italian when you speak neither is probably not going to take us anywhere. So we need to find out what is it that we have in common, what is it that resonates with the other, to see if we can go from what is known to what is unknown. And whether they are also open to that, because let's be honest, sometimes people are not. You can still try, and that's great, but there's probably a limit to when we might push them away for trying repeatedly to do something that we think that they want that they might not. So it's really hard, right? It's really a balance between understanding the other person and taking some time to think about what are they like, what do they relate like, as opposed to coming with a preconceived, canned answer or a couple of sentences to tell them. I would suggest spend some time thinking about the person. What is it that the person relates to and resonates? And then try to engage in that conversation. But if nothing else, just be there for them. Because ultimately, that's what we all need. Sometimes our intellectual side cannot work when our emotional side is so worked up. I see that in kids every day. If you're going to school and you're getting bullied, you're not worrying about what you're learning because you're so worried about what's emotionally happening. So sometimes we need to just be there emotionally first to then be able to reach an intellectual level where we can have the conversation. To make a long-winded story short, obviously there are different approaches. My approach would be to try to see what resonates with that person, be there for them, and then find a way when time arrives of communicating something reassuring, positive to them, to see if you find a fertile ground on which to have more conversations. But if that doesn't happen, or if they don't want to, we also have to be okay with that. And that's extremely hard, because sometimes the people we love, we want to give that knowledge to them, but they don't want necessarily to take it just yet. And we have to respect that too, and that's extremely hard. That would be how I would go about it. And I would not forget, though, to pray. To pray and ask for assistance, because this is not an individual job, right? It's a team effort. I would ask for assistance and for help on finding the best possible way of approaching, if at all possible. That's how I would try to do about it. Another great topic for discussion.
Pode ir, Alexandre? Por favor. Podemos ir? Bom, eu queria registrar aqui a minha profunda gratidão